Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross, and exchange it someday for a crown.
We will get back into chapter 7 of Daniel. Had a lot of information last week, and I think we got up to verse 15, I think.
Yes.
But we were talking about, the Ancient of Days, and we discussed that, and we discussed the Son of Man presented. And the difference, the Son of Man being Christ and the Ancient of Days being God the Father. This distinct difference in the two. When he approached the Ancient of Days, it couldn't be both of them. It had to be one and the other. We discussed that last week. And I think we ended up at chapter verse number 14. So we're going to begin with verse 15. I'll just read it and then I'll go to my notes. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and the visions of my mind kept alarming me. I approached one of those who were standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all of this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. And I'm going to talk about that before I move on to verse 17. Daniel knew that there were to be 4 great worldwide empires. He knew that. To succeed, one to succeed the other. And before the time of the Gentiles came to an end. I think we discussed last week also the time of the Gentiles. We are in those times right now. That time is still going on right now. He also knew that the first one, the Babylonian Empire, was still in existence at that time. And if the other 3 would last as long as that one did, then he had in his mind, he had a while before the time of the Gentiles would come along, because they still had 3 more empires to go. So, and he know the stone kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God, was to be set up after the Roman Empire would fall. What troubled Daniel most was the character of the 4 wild beasts and the meaning of the little horn. And we mentioned the little horn last week. In verse 16, Daniel says, he came near to me, to one of them that stood and asked. The bystanders, as we mentioned last week, are God's messengers. Daniel didn't go to any other human being asking them about the interpretation of his vision. Just as God gave Daniel the interpretation of the visions of Nebuchadnezzar and Darius, men before him, he couldn't interpret his own vision. So God sent messengers to interpret the vision for his vision for him. So the heavenly bystanders informed him that the 4 wild beasts represented the 4 kings which should rise in the earth, and their power would then be taken from them by the saints of the Most High. Now, saints of the Most High, came across that because we have to remember we are saints. We are living in this dispensation. The saints that we're talking about here in this particular text, we won't be here. The church age, us, we will be gone before this particular thing happens, before the rapture. So those saints of the Most High, they are the saints that will go into the rapture. And from all the information that I got, different locations, the location of the war is here on earth, and the time during the reign of the little horn distinctly given as 3.5 years. So the saints of the Most High must be Daniel's people, the Jews, right? It's written that the Jews will return to Jerusalem to build the temple. So those are the saints of the Most High that we're talking about here. We said earlier that the Most High is the Son of Man, Jesus Christ, who is the Messiah of the Jews. So they are the saints of the end times who will receive the kingdom along with Christ. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 13. The Lord here is speaking to the Jews. It says, the Lord will make you the head and not the tail, and you only will be above, and you will not be underneath. If you listen to the commandments of the Lord your God, which I charge you today to observe them carefully. So these are the Jews from Israel that he's talking to. He says they'll be the head of the nations during the millennium, and they are the God-fearing Jews that shall escape destruction by the little horn during the great tribulation. Daniel was still troubled by the little horn's conduct. Back to Daniel. In verse 19 and 20, Daniel learns that the 10 kings that shall rise and another king shall rise after them and subdue 3 of the original 10 kings. We're talking, I think we mentioned that the little horn last week. We're talking about the Antichrist, right? The king shall speak words against the Most High and wear out the saints of the Most High. And we already determined that they are the saints of Jerusalem. And they would be given into his hand for 3.5 years. Now, what happened there is they made a covenant for 7 years. But 3.5 years into that covenant, that's when the Antichrist broke the covenant. And for the next 3.5 years, he persecuted the Christians and killed and whatever he did, anything he wanted to do, because those saints were given over into his hands. The judgment shall sit, verse 9 through 12. We're going back and forth here. Verse 9 through 12. And they shall take away the little horn's dominion, and the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High.
Yeah.
Verse 9 through 12. Yeah, up 7. That's where the Ancient of Days will destroy. And the kingdom of heaven will be given to the saints of the Most High. In some manuscripts, it says that they will take the kingdom, the saints will take the kingdom, but it's actually God takes the kingdom and hands it to the saints his saints, saints of the Most High. So let's talk about times and laws. Talking about this little horn here. The little horn will think to change times and laws, and the Jews shall be given into his hand for 3.5 years. That's in verse 25. Now the rabbis understood times and laws and the Hebrew Sabbaths and festivals that regulated them. So these laws and everything will be reestablished when the Jews return to their land and rebuild the temple. They will be in force when the little horn, the Antichrist, shall make a covenant with them for 1 week or 7 years. In the middle of the week, the Antichrist will break the covenant, like I just said, and that's in Daniel 9:27. If you want to go there to read that, it states that. Chapter 9, verse 27.
So you have to,
Mhm.
and because you keep using the word weeks here. How we, how much time is these weeks? We consider that.
That would be Daniel's 70th week. Right? The 70th week of Daniel, that's the tribulation period.
Okay, so where are we at now? When you're talking about weeks, how would you? Where are we?
What week are we in right now?
Yeah, are we in these weeks here now? You mentioned times and laws.
Yeah.
Then you mentioned weeks and time weeks in here. Or this is just.
There's no weeks.
We're going back and forth. There's no weeks right now.
Okay.
As we read the scriptures verse by verse, you have to go back to some earlier scriptures sometime to explain, or back to, in this case, chapter 9 to explain something that's in chapter 7. We're going to be jumping back and forth, but we're somewhere in between 69 and 70 right now. The 70th week won't start. As far as the weeks, 70th week won't start until the Great Tribulation. The tribulation, not the Great Tribulation, which is, some say that's the 3.5 years. Christ called that the Great Tribulation, but the whole 7-year period is the tribulation period. And that's Daniel's 70th week.
So when we talk weeks, are we talking literal weeks, or we talking weeks of years?
No, it's explained as when Daniel, in Daniel, it talks about times, and half a time. That would be time 1 year, times 2 years, that's 3, and half a time, the half year, 3.5 years.
Okay, so you're talking, okay, so every time is a year.
Yes,
Okay, so that's separate from the weeks we're talking about, right?
yes,
Okay, so you mentioned a covenant, which you said 7 years.
7-year covenant, yes.
Okay, so when you start talking about time and times,
Mhm.
you're talking half of that 7 years.
Yes.
Which is 3.5.
Okay, so the whole 7 years, would that be 1 week?
Yes, in this case,
Okay, so the weeks a year.
yes.
Okay, so you said 69 weeks and already passed.
We're in, yes,
Okay, so we're waiting on the 70th week,
yes,
which is the last week.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying in the 70th week, which haven't happened yet, he's gonna make a covenant, and then and half of that 70th week is the term. There's times, and half the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think to run it, or, if I'm understanding your question, right, you're saying about the times, right, the weeks, right, so 70 weeks, what Daniel was talking about is 70 years, because they went into captivity for
Mhm.
70 years.
Mhm.
So that's the weeks. We all know that when God defines days, it's not to our understanding. Like, so when we're talking about the end, you
Mhm.
know, we talk about the dispensations, where we are, what millennium, the word you may hear. Is that the question when we talk about the weeks? Are we at the 1,000 year of what weeks? Because if you look at it, it's some would say that we're in that 1,000 year of week one for God, meaning when it gets to the seventh, just like the end of everything comes to culmination and rest. So that is that like the difference of the weeks we're trying to establish here today, because Daniel does jump back and forth, where he's talking about the end of his dispensation at the 70, which way they were talked about going in. I think we were hitting alluding to that at 9 a little bit, right? Yeah. 9:25, 9:24 and 25, they talk about that.
Yeah.
But then Daniel was also talking about the greater weeks of the people, not just particular, and more on the lines of God's time. Are you asking like that difference of the weeks?
Yeah, well, see, when we start counting the weeks, we have to have a starting point. So I guess what I'm trying to flesh out is if we haven't got to the 70th week, then this is Daniel's vision. And we know the church is a mystery because he sees us going straight from the 6th and 9th week into the 7th week in his vision.
Right.
Okay, so he didn't see this time now.
This dispensation,
Right,
the
so
church
when the
age.
7th week starts, not after the church is gone, but after the signing of the covenant.
Right.
That's when which happens to be after the church is gone.
Mhm.
Okay. So my thing is, when does the time start for the 7th week? How do we know that we're not in the 62nd week? You know, when does the time start? Now I was looking for it here, and we'll get to it, but we have to establish how we know we're not in the 7th week. One, we know the covenant has to sign, but when do you start counting from? And Daniel do say somewhere in here, maybe somebody's got tricking hands at me. It was started from the rebuilding of the wall.
Yeah.
Okay, which that'll be taught in Nehemiah. But it talks about him building for 62 weeks. Then the 7th week, the Messiah will be cut off. Not the 7th, but 69th week,
69.
the Messiah will be cut off.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's talking about the crucifixion of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So what made the gap between the 6th and 9th week and the 7th week?
The church age.
Okay, the church
That
age,
Daniel didn't see.
that you didn't see. Okay, so that means when he came, the disciples who knew the Old Testament,
Mhm.
they said, "Lord, are you come to set your kingdom up now?"
Right.
You see what I'm
Because
saying?
they didn't see the church age.
Right, and then for them to ask that question, apparently they didn't see the tribulation time, because he comes to set his kingdom up for 1,000 years.
Right.
You see how it's overlapping?
So there's the church age, which we're in now, and the tribulation. Because he don't set his kingdom up until after the tribulation.
Right. It's kind of hard to track now if you're not focused. So all this is covered. We need to have this information. So when you start mentioning, you know, the stopping of the sacrifices, the changing the time, and changing the laws, you know, not connected. You need the little bits of information. Okay, we haven't gotten to Nehemiah yet, but when Artaxerxes goes to Nehemiah and he says, "I have an unwalled city."
Mhm.
And he sent him to build the wall. That's when the 7th week count started. So you want to mark that while he's saying 7th week. You know, when does the 7th week start? And it starts at the rebuilding of the wall. So, and remember now, when Harry said earlier last week, chapter 7 is a panoramic view. That's when it's going back and forth.
Right.
It's a panoramic view of the whole scene. It's not a chronological sequence. So he's mentioning stuff here, and all I'm trying to do, Eric, is just flush it out, because you mentioned the stuff, because he does it out of sequence.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think it's out of sequence because Daniel was asking questions about a vision that he already.
Right,
So
it's
it's kinda-
panoramic. He's
Yeah, so
like-
he's like, hey, what about that? What, can you explain that? to me?
Right.
Because everything he said, I need to know with certainty. So he says that before, or it might be with clarity, but he wants to know because his own understanding of what he just saw, it pierced him. It's like, I just seen,
Right.
the end of everything. So he's trying to grasp that concept, but instead of standing there saying, I gotta figure this out on my own. Can you
Right.
explain it? And that's what the messengers are doing. So that's why the sequence is so broken, because it's like, if we've seen a big picture, we might not, hey man, what happened at the end? But remember the
Like,
beginning?
look at that thing there.
Yeah, so he's getting different parts of it. So it seems fragmented, but it's only fragmented because he's asking the questions in the order of the questions they come to his mind.
And this is for you also, because you're teaching it like it's here. But in our mind, we sit out there, well, how does that connect to that? You see what I'm saying? So that's why it's like it's skipping and jumping. And it is as we read it, but we do have a straight line, connection to it as we go through it.
And that's why Daniel mentions, in his mind, he's judging the end times from the time of the Babylonian Empire. He's saying, okay, I see the Babylonian Empire, it was this many years. And he knows there's going to be 4 empires. So he boom, 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 boom. And to him, that's the end times because he didn't know about the church age.
And I think that's the common consensus with a lot of the prophets, the kings. They all see the end time. They just don't know what it is.
They don't know.
They're in this. Hey, like if you think about Samuel and God telling Samuel, go pick a king. Samuel's like, oh, a king. Like, okay, I'm doing this. But Samuel sees and he knows what God is showing him thus far, even though he's not. And he's saying, oh, I'm just picking a king for now. But he didn't understand that I'm picking a king to set up the line of kings. So they all see that.
Well, see, their vision, you have to understand, these are visions that God gave them, okay? And he's giving this vision to them, it's there. And like you said in verse 15, it says, I, Daniel, was grieved by spirit within my body that the vision of my head troubled me, okay? He gave the vision, but he has to grasp hold of the understanding. That's why it's, you go back and say, I came near to one who, those who stood by and asked him the truth of all this.
Right.
God sent someone to what? To interpret what Daniel was seeing. Okay? And then as you get to this, is the understanding, like you said here, as Ken said, that panoramic view. You're standing up here, you looking, it's like us looking at that pink center there, but we see everything else around it. And everything around it is coordinated to what? To give us a meaning, an understanding that we can't figure out.
But a large portion of that, Daniel didn't see.
Right.
And all the prophets, they didn't see a large portion of, we see it here now, but they didn't see that.
Right. They were veiled. Yeah, Ken.
So I don't kind of push back on it. I think they saw it, they just didn't
Didn't
understand it.
yes.
Because, I always reference this even with my own studies, is David never was crucified. But yet Psalms 22 talks about
Him being
crucifixion,
crucified.
things
Right.
that David, how do you know this, David? How do you, so he wrote with
Prophetic standard to the Lord.
Right.
he wrote what he saw, what he saw in visions, what he came out through his songs, whatever he could understand. And it's the same thing with Daniel. They see it all. It's probably so quick in a flash, like if we would have a dream. And then you like the beauty of it is they have someone say, hey, I'm close enough to God. Can you help me? And we still have that understanding as well. But in this context and terms, we're talking how Daniel had the actual right there on the spot to interpret dream instead of us mulling around praying about it. That's the question Daniel had right then and there is the access to the answers.
Now, you mentioned Daniel chapter 9. Hey, that's brought me to this. Because in all fairness to Daniel, in his panoramic view, he has chapter 9 in the scene. Of course, we'd have to go through 8 and 9. But I would like to look at this 9:24 right quick.
Okay.
Just to give us what's when we go home today. We got a little homework. So as Eric moved from 7 to 8, we get these weeks windows to start, okay? Now I'm not gonna go into Nehemiah, but he's hinted to it, okay? Okay, the 9:24 says, ready?
Yeah.
70 weeks, okay, have been decreed for your people in your holy city to finish the transgressions, to make an end to sin, to make an atonement for iniquity. To make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting rights, to seal up visions and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Verse 25. So you are to know and discern that from the issue of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, got it?
Mhm.
That's the building of the wall. Until Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Okay, so 7 and 62 is 69.
Right.
Okay, so it says, okay, until the Messiah the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in the times of distress. And of course, in Nehemiah talks about how they had the sword in one hand
Right.
and they was building brick with the other because they had an unwalled city.
Mhm.
Okay. Then after the 62 weeks, okay, because you had 1 week,
Mhm.
then you had 62 weeks, which is 69. Okay. And it says verse 26, then after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off. That's the crucifixion of Christ. And having nothing, and the people of the prince was come, will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Okay. And this end will come with the flood, of course. Now we're talking about the going into the 70 weeks, of course, coming to as a flood, the Antichrist, the last 7 weeks. So right now, the next major thing that's going to happen before this is to take away as a church.
Yes.
So just keeping Daniel chapter 9, that I just read in view, when you start talking about weeks here, you know, now when you start talking about time, and half the times, okay, that's gonna happen in the 70th week.
Mhm.
But within the 70th week, times and laws gonna be changed.
Right.
We talking weeks of years, so 3.5 years within that 70th week, he's gonna break the covenant. Okay, so just want to put that out there, so as he's talking about weeks, that's that last tribulation the whole time, but within that time, some terrible things are gonna happen.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's figuratively and spiritual, because it's also Daniel is their end of their captivity. So it's a dual state. Remember, Jeremiah told them they was going to captivity how many years?
70 years.
So when they came out of captivity, now the instruction is because all of this has to go together for the forward going. So they have a spiritual understanding, which Daniel was kind of getting the clarity on it. And that's why it seems like it's bouncing back and forth. Daniel was like, wait, we can't ready to come out of captivity. We got to start getting people to build a wall, but I'm not going to be around. So I got to make sure that the people know that this is coming, because this is also going to set up what's coming in the future. That vision of Christ. Because if you just read this and don't understand that in Deuteronomy, God told them about being taken into captivity and ruled over by kings.
Mhm.
In Leviticus, he repeated it again, if you disobey the laws, this is what happened. And then Jeremiah forewarned, y'all kings have fallen, you know, like go off this church, y'all kings have fallen so low. Now Israel, y'all going to Babylon, but now they got to go back to do what was supposed to originally be done. Remember, everything keeps getting deterred because of the sins of the nation. Because of the sins of the nation. And I mean, that you can even kind of put that stamp on the church. Imagine if the church came together and all of the saints start to scream, holy, holy, the church will be lifted. But since it's such a difficult task to get everybody in one mind, this is why it takes.
Yeah.
Time.
So anytime it talks about the weeks, like 62 weeks, it's actually talking years. And not actual weeks as we know weeks.
Well, every week it talks about here is 7 years. Because when we say the 70th week, we're talking about the last 7 years. So when we say 62 weeks, okay, that's, for every week, you gotta multiply times 7. You got 400 and some years.
Okay.
Yeah,
So 60 is 6.
now 3 score is 60.
I mean
60.
60. So it's 62 times 7. Cause each week is 7 years. Okay.
Right, that's important to know, the way she's asking that question.
Mhm.
Because that's what we have to do, man, get the pencil and paper out. Because I'm gonna tell you, if we was in the Old Testament, having what we have now, we'd be good prophets. I mean, cause we know now, we look in hindsight, we got the veil lifted.
That's
But
why
the
I
way she
said,
just did that.
that's why I
is
said
the
you
way
will
gotta
do greater.
Get your pencil and paper out and
You do
actually
greater works.
draw the line and you can see, and you see the big gap in the churches there. Because you got some here that are millennials. They think that there's no millennium, we're in the millennium now. But when you start talking about these weeks and you look at it, wait a minute, okay, the Bible says it's only 1,000 years. Okay, if we've been on millenniums ever since Christ, then that's been 2,000 years. You know, so then they say, well, 1,000 years is not literal, it's figurative. You
But it
know,
actually has 1,000 years from, I mean,
Right.
and the thing is, I think, Dennis, you asked this question before, and we were doing like the math of where we are and how the years break down. And we, you know, with that math there, it's somewhere around, and I can't give an exact because I don't have an exact day one. But if you go from what that scale and, you know, some pretty smart people together, it's about 5,000 years and 700, 900, give or take, somewhere around there, about how old the earth really is. I know a lot of people might say, no, it's a billion years old, but that's a whole nother conversation. But if you think about that, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. And then we're gonna get ready to go into the 6th week. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
there's a different week there.
But
because
it-
each week is 1,000 years.
Each week's a thought, but then you got that, you see, it keeps breaking down, so you have to understand the context of it, everything. It was taught before, or somebody can tell you this, and you're like, oh yeah, that means this. No, that 70 weeks, although pertaining to them coming out of exile, but it also pertained to Christ. Remember, this is a vision. So visions, when they have it, they're seeing things that are not, it might relate to what's going on there, but it's also relating so far that they don't even know how to really grasp it.
But you're saying it's weeks of 1,000 years, you got weeks of days, and then you got weeks of years. That's it, Sheree, that was a very good question you asked. And it behooves all of us to go back and start looking at these numbers, because if not, you know, we just glide through this. And I know we're slowing you down, Eric, but this is nothing to glide through. You know, because
I
this
couldn't
is the
glide
grace of God.
You also gotta remember that like you said, it goes back to the very beginning when God put the time in place for man himself.
Yes,
Okay, then he put his law in for the people, his people, based on 7 years and stuff. And, you know, they were supposed to let the land rest every, what?
7 years.
7 years.
And so
Okay?
day he
Have
rested,
Jubilee at the 49th.
now, and
Okay.
this is where, you know, not to throw controversy in, but the controversial part of what's canonical and non-canonical, because the Book of Jubilee actually explains this whole 7-year concept from top to bottom, because it's something they did continuously, and you wouldn't know that. You would only hear about the Jubilee or slightly understand it. Once again, I don't get into the argument of canonical, but if you're having issues with understanding the whole 7-year process, the Book of Jubilee, which is non-canonical, will help you understand that. It helped me. That's all I'm saying.
You won't, let me say this, you won't understand all of it until
I had
you
said-
get there.
And I said, well, let Dennis go ahead and ask this question first. Go ahead, Dennis.
Well, I know you're in Daniel 7, you're talking in Daniel 9. Can I ask a question concerning what we're just talking about in 9?
Yeah.
That verse 26 that you mentioned, is that yet to come? Because that looks a whole lot like what Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24 about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
But yes, the Messiah, when the Messiah was cut off, that happened.
Yeah, and then the description there about the prince, the people of the prince, the Romans coming in, destroying the city, the sanctuary, the end will be of the flood. And then, of course, over in 24:2 in Matthew, he says, there shall not be one stone left upon another. There will be eternity.
But look at verse 27 of Daniel 9, it says, and he will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week. You see that? And so
7 years.
Now, I'm assuming that's the future though.
that's the future about it. Yeah, you see how Daniel leaped and bound?
Yeah.
That's the future.
Mhm.
Now, I had said something, some months ago about every subject in the world, God has already introduced. Learning math in school was nothing new. During the creation, he could have just created and not said anything. He said, this is the first day, this is the second day, you know, this is the third day. He kept mentioning numbers, and them numbers are made for us to keep up with, like, say for them. They had certain days and numbers and weeks that they had to bring sacrifice, that they had to do certain sacraments. So even in the numbering of the days, they was to keep and remember at certain times they had to do certain things.
Yeah.
And so now we see again here weeks and days. Now we ought to be able to discern the times and the days and the weeks. And I'm gonna tell you, to know this, it just brings such peace of mind. Because all the prophecies in the past that has come to pass, has not only come to pass, but they came to pass right on time. These dates and times and weeks has already been decreed. They're not being decided upon now, depending on how man functions. They've already been decreed. And they sure to happen. It's just that we don't know when. But actually, I said last week or week before when I was preaching, you can tell a person's future. We know the future of Israel, we know the future of the Gentiles, we know the future of the elect, we know the future of the non-elect.
Mhm.
You know, we know how it's gonna be played. God has given us this through the writings of Daniel. This is a masterpiece of the future and the present and the past. Well, not the present, but the past. Good question, there, Sheree. Good question.
So let's move on. Now, we all know about the second coming of Christ, right? That hadn't happened yet. There are two other comings that we want to talk about. And that's the coming of the Antichrist and the coming of Satan. Now, we'll explain that as we go along. In the Old and New Testaments, we are told the mysterious and terrible personage who shall be revealed in the closing days of this dispensation. He is called by various names. I'm gonna give you some scriptures, and I'm not gonna go to every scripture. You can look at them at your own in your own time. He's called the Assyrian in Isaiah 10:5-6. If you just want to jot some of these numbers down. Say again? The Assyrian in Isaiah 10:5-6. It's all in the Old Testament. He's called the wicked in Isaiah 11:4. He's called the king of Babylon in Isaiah 14:4. He's called Lucifer in Isaiah 14:12. He's called the king of Tyrus in Ezekiel 28:11-19. And of course, the little horn, Daniel 7:8. And Daniel 8:9-12. It's called the king of fierce countenance, Daniel 8:23. called the willful king, in Daniel 11:36. Couple New Testament scriptures. He's called the man of sin in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 3 through 8. He's called the son of perdition, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 3 through 8, same scripture. It's called both of those names. It's called the wicked, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8, specifically. It's called the Antichrist, 1 John 2:18. It's called the beast in Revelations 13th chapter 1 through 8. Those are some of the scriptures that, and there are others, names.
You had mentioned he's called a series. In Isaiah, he's just talking about the nation of Syrians.
Yeah.
Being a chastening rod of God to Israel. Because that happened 100 years, 100 years in Psalm before the Babylonian captivity. Okay, so they, there was anti-God in the sense they was against God's people, but God used them as a chastening rod for his people 100 years before Babylon. So he wasn't, we don't want to give that name to the Antichrist, but yet the ones who was anti against God's people, God used those people as he did Nebuchadnezzar to chasten his people.
Okay, look at Isaiah 14, 24 and 25. That may be the same. And Isaiah 30th chapter, 27 through 33, where he's called Syrian. Those are just some scriptures you can look at later. So let's get back to the image. So the 10 toes of the image represent the 10 kings that will rise up from the revised Roman kingdom that will come in the future. We know about the revised Roman kingdom, right? The Roman kingdom was the last kingdom during Daniel's time that he saw. But then there's the 10 toes that was talked about later. And those toes represented 10 kings. And this is the revised Roman kingdom, the last stage of the Roman Empire. That was the first stage of the Roman Empire. There you see on the poster there. But now we're talking about the last stage of the Roman Empire, which will be just before the millennium. Okay, let's compare Daniel's vision of the fourth beast with John's vision of the fourth beast in Revelations chapter 13, verse 1 through 7. You get time, read that, Revelations 13, 1 through 7. We're going to talk a little bit about a couple of differences in their vision and some similarities. So in Daniel's beast, he had great iron teeth. We read that before. It devoured and broke to pieces and stamped the residue of the three previous beasts, the three previous empires, right? And it had 10 horns. And then within those 10 horns came up a little horn, which we also just determined that it was the Antichrist, with 3 of the first 10 horns plucked up by the roots. And this little horn had eyes like a man and a mouth speaking great things. It's Daniel 7, 7 through 8. The fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth, and the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall rise, and another king shall rise after them, that shall subdue 3 kings. He shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and dividing of time. And that's Daniel 7:23 through 25. Then we talked about times, time and division of time and half times. Okay, that was Daniel's vision that he saw. Now John saw same vision, couple different, a couple of very similar, couple of different details. In Revelation chapter 13, we read that John's beast had 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, a little bit different from Daniel's beast. And on his horns were 10 crowns, and upon his heads were the names of blasphemy. Now, John's beast was like a leopard, had the feet of a bear and the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. We're going to talk about that. And I saw one of his heads were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And it says the world wondered. And from his mouth he spoke great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him to continue 42 months. You figure that out, 42 months is what, 3.5 years? Okay. It was given to him to make war with the saints, to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and all tongues and all nations during that 42 months. Both saw the beast coming from the sea in their vision. Daniel being from the great sea, and that's in Daniel 7:2. We read that. John had his vision while he was prisoner on the Isle of Patmos, which is an island of the great sea. Same area, same vicinity. Daniel's beast was exceedingly strong and had iron teeth and nails and brass, while John's beast was like a leopard and a bear and the mouth of a lion. Daniel's beast represented the Roman Empire, its characteristics, and describes the old Roman Empire, while the characteristics of John's beast describe the future Roman Empire or revised Roman Empire.
So, the word beast here is not always talking about a person, it's talking about a fourth kingdom.
Yes,
Okay, or if you intermingle with both.
yes,
Okay.
Yes, the
So
beast that,
just like we saw the beast with the lion and the bear and the leopard.
right.
This is just a fourth kingdom of revived Rome, mentioned beast, certainly. But understand it's not just one person, it's a system.
Right.
I was thinking that John's beast was a combination of Paul's, no, that's the
Daniel?
Daniel's vision of his beast.
and you can say that, you can say,
Because I'm looking at the picture, the lion, the bear, and the leopard, and John's vision had attributes of all 3
all of them, yes.
of all of them to make up the 4th.
Because remember Daniel said the residue was trampled out, residues remaining of any of the other. Okay,
Right.
like when you had the Medo-Persian take over Babylon, you have a residue from Babylon in the Medo-Persian. In other words, all the people didn't get killed, some of them just folded over into it. But when Rome is revived.
Right,
you know,
he was reading, he was going over the differences in Daniel's and John's visions. And in Daniel's vision, the 4th beast stomped out the other 3. In John's vision, the 4th beast was a combination of the other 3.
And you'll see why in a few minutes.
Okay.
That's what they saw. That's the vision that was given to them.
Mhm.
So you can't change that. What Daniel saw was what God gave to him. And what John saw is what God gave to him. John saw something in addition that Daniel didn't see. So that was the vision that was given to them. And we'll see that in a minute. Both saw the beast coming from the sea in their vision, I think I read this part. Daniel's beast was exceedingly strong and had iron teeth and blah, blah, blah. I read that. Daniel's beast represented the Roman Empire, while John's beast represented the revised Roman Empire. So we're talking two different times here. Daniel didn't see what John saw, the revised Roman Empire. There's something about the toes that John saw that Daniel didn't see. And that's,
So it's the same vision, remember, like, it's the circumstance versus the circumstance. Daniel is seeing something from his perspective, his view. So anything that Daniel is describing is from his view and perspective of what he's seen. You have to think between Daniel and John's vision is years. I'm just saying years just to be light with it, but it's probably about, about 4 or 5, maybe almost close to 700 years between these two visions, maybe even more. What I'm saying is when John saw his vision, and this is what a lot of people neglect, I'm not saying it anywhere here. But the last Bible is called the Revelation of Jesus Christ. We're just so used to saying revelation that we forget this is actually Jesus Christ telling John more detail, or the revealing of more detail from this. So this is even a millennium. Even John got to see the church, but only in something where he said, I don't even know who all these people are, where they come from. I thought it was just going to be us. And he's like, no, these are the people whose names have been written in the book of Lamb. Even that's still a mystery to John, because he doesn't know, but what he does know. He knows what he's doing, but he just doesn't know the impact of it. So everything that he's seeing is it's all the same vision. If you go back and you really look at the prophecies, they seem like they're dealing with the current situation, but they're telling the prophets about what's happening in reality and also what's happening spiritually to come, each one. Jeremiah talks about the erasing of sins, and the children of Israel, like, hey, he's going to abolish us. You see, but he's talking about that coming. They're all talking about the coming. It's intertwined in the stories that they're dealing with at the time. So if you can see the Christ in the stories, you'll kind of start to line up what Eric is trying to explain to us about the two beasts. We know it's the same beast. John's just seeing it, a better picture of, a better understanding of, because he's getting that revelation for us. So it's the prophecy of the book. All the other ones have been closed. John is telling us what's going to happen, but it still seems so even confusing to John.
And the beauty about this is I can sit here and daydream and have a vision from my own head, or I can go to sleep and have a dream from AP, so I call it dream. But the vision.
Probably be a little different.
They're not having
What we're reading here is the vision that Daniel have and the vision that John have. Both of these visions have been given from the same person.
From God.
And so these visions have to mean the same thing. He's not gonna give Daniel a vision opposite or different from the vision he's giving John.
Right. When he's talking about the same thing.
Vision, okay, but he did not take their character away from them and explain it. He let them do that in their own character, like he did in the Gospels. He didn't take themselves from them and write it. And so the Holy Spirit moved these men along to write what God has revealed to them. And so it's true on both sides. It's like we both see an accident out there in the street, right? And the police take our statements down. They're not going to be exactly the same. They're going to be somewhat, because if they're the same, then I mean, we coerced it.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just when you're lying, okay? So you know that this is not coerced because the stories are told seemingly slightly different, but they're the same story because they come from the same witness.
Yeah.
which is God. So let's just keep that in mind. Daniel and John is not off
No,
because they got the information from the same source.
okay, Revelations chapter 17, verse 12. I'm gonna read that to you real quick and then we're gonna move on. The 10 horns, verse 12. The 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom. Okay, that tells us something. But they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. We see that both Daniel and John foresaw the Roman Empire was to be eventually divided into 10 federated kingdoms. And one last similarity of the two beasts is that in Daniel, time and dividing of times in Daniel 7:25 corresponds perfectly, equally to John's 42 months in Revelations 13 verse 5. Let's speak a little bit about the Antichrist, right? The little horn. The Antichrist or last Gentile ruler. I said gentle, did I say gentle? Gentile ruler. Then he gonna get rough.
First part of it.
Then he gonna get rough. Will be a composite man, as described in Revelations 13:2. Let's go there real quick. Revelations 13:2. 13:2 says, and the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet was like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. Okay, we discussed that a couple lines ago. He will have the combined abilities and powers enhanced by the power that of the dragon will give him, and that's Revelation 13:2, which I just read. Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian king, Xerxes, who was from the Medo-Persian kingdom, Alexander the Great from the third kingdom, and Caesar Augustus, who's from the first Roman kingdom. He will have the gift of attracting this part here. I was kind of blew me away. He will have the gift of attracting unregenerate men.
Where you at, Eric?
This is not the scripture part. This is in my notes here, but just trying to describe this Antichrist that's going to come on the scene. And I think Pastor Ken talked about it in a couple of Sundays. His charisma, he's going to be the man.
Silver tongue.
And it's funny, I was at a friend of mine's Bible study last night, and he broke down a word, and I think Omar might have said it too, that charisma is the thing that sways hearts. Like a very charismatic person can make you change your personality and way of thinking. So can you imagine this person is not just speaking charismatic to you and I, he's speaking charismatic to sway an entire nation to change their mind from belief to disbelief just by saying something does not exist.
No, that to a point that happens right now.
Well, and I only say
All over the
that.
world.
I only say that because it's. I'll say
He will be tenfold of what's happening,
yeah.
or 100-fold. I can't. Just listen. He will have the gift of attracting unregenerate men and the irresistible fascination of his personality. Right? If something's irresistible, that means you can't
resist it.
nothing you can do, right? His superhuman wisdom, powers as a consummate flatterer, diplomat, strategist, all of which will make him the most attractive and prominent of men. We're talking about a man, right? We already established that. And this is a man that will control the world at that particular time. All these gifts will be awarded to him by Satan. He will intoxicate men with a strong delusion, and his success. He shall be slain and rise again with all these powers, and in addition, have the embodiment of all kinds of wickedness and blasphemy. There's never been a person on the earth with the description of the little horn. Here he is. Yet the scriptures clearly foretell the coming of such a person. The world today is rejecting Christ for eternal salvation and will readily accept the Antichrist until eternal damnation. That's how, if you want to say spectacular, I don't know. I don't know what one word to put to him, but this is what he would, Antichrist. This is what he would do. And the last part I wanted to talk about was the before in chapter 8 was the false prophet. Let me get back to Daniel here real quick. The false prophet who will also show up with the Antichrist, John describes in Revelations 13:11 as the beast from the earth. All up until this point, we kept talking about the beast from the sea, right? Revelations 13:11 talks about the beast from the earth. And this, the part I said, the little extra that God gave John that he didn't give Daniel, a little bit more insight. This second beast, called the false prophet, 3 times in Revelation 16:13, just write them down. In Revelations 19:20, and in Revelations 20:10. Twice with the first beast, the Antichrist, and once with the dragon, with Satan.
What was the one before 1920?
Revelations,
Like you were saying it together, but I didn't hear how it all went.
Revelations 16:13, Revelations 19:20, and Revelations 20:10. The 3 times that he's called the false prophet, those are the 3 scriptures that I got that from. The first 2 with the Antichrist. This false prophet and the Antichrist is not the same person. So he talks about it with the Antichrist in the first 2 scriptures, and the third with Satan. Let's go to the third one and read that one. Revelations 20, verse 10. And the devil, who is who? Satan, who deceived them, was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also. Okay, so 3 of them.
So Satan,
The false prophet
And the
and the
Antichrist.
beast,
Antichrist.
Antichrist. So the beast is,
Yeah.
Antichrist.
beast of the Antichrist. The beast, the beast that came from the earth is the false prophet.
False prophet.
Put them in perspective, make sure I got, and Satan is his own entity of his own.
Yes,
He's the one who gave these 2 power.
the gifts.
Yeah, so they welcome it, maybe.
Let's go to Matthew 24:24. Speaks of this very thing. Matthew 24:24 says, and false prophets will arise and will show great signs and wonders, so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. And all those attributes we talked about that this guy's going to have. There it is in the New Testament. The Antichrist is to be the king and rule over a kingdom. He will accept the kingdoms of the world, the same ones that Satan offered Christ, that Christ refused. In Luke 4th chapter, 5th through the 8th verse.
Man, Eric, I think I'm over here having a brain though, and I know I probably should just walk away from this, man, but you have said something that just makes it. So if the Antichrist,
Uh-huh.
is that gonna be like a religion of its own? The Antichrist, right, is going to be the one. So is the false prophet gonna preach with the Antichrist messages? Or are they gonna be two separate entities working against, just doubling down on the forces of what the believer has?
It's
Meaning-
three separate entities,
Well,
okay?
say it.
One
Go ahead.
is going to, you should follow this guy,
Like vice beast.
right? Like, okay,
And that's what I'm asking.
let's turn it over. Let's turn it over to the holy side of it. You have God,
Mhm.
you have the Son,
Mhm.
and you have the Holy Spirit, right? When the Son came, he spoke of who?
The Father.
Okay, so when the Son left, he said, I'm gonna send who? Okay, so kind of, I don't want to put them two together.
Yeah, because what I'm trying
What kind of-
False Trinity is what you got.
It's just like. the
Yeah,
Trinity.
false Trinity.
Okay, but what the question I'm asking, and I ask this because we know that they are separate entities. We know that that Satan gave them this power, but he only give the power. We already know that. What I'm trying to see is this two different, as believers, and we know that the saints, we were talking about something, but we brought it up. Are we looking at two different fronts that we have to fight? Meaning the Antichrist, because if the Antichrist is against Christ, that means he's probably not religious at all. So if a false prophet is here speaking of false prophecy, that means the two, they should seem like they shouldn't be together. Because if Jesus, if you hear, if the false prophet is preaching something other than Christ, right?
Mhm.
And the Antichrist is a non-believer of that, but he
Wait,
doesn't.
wait. The false prophet is not going to preach anything about Christ.
Right, he's not going to preach. The false prophet is going to preach against the gospel. The Antichrist is not going to preach for or against any gospel, which will lead people to follow them. Or so are they working together in secret? Is this something that, do we need? And I'm only asking the questions just to get the brain going. When we see this, because this is an adversary that's only spoke about, but when they talk about it, it's kind of quick. Like, oh, it's the Antichrist. It's just not going to like Christ. It's so much more than that as the believers have to face. It's a fight. It's a fight on a front where you can't get your food because I've risen up the power of political. It's a fight now. You cannot go to a place and belief to get relief because they don't. You see what I'm saying? I just wanted to.
God sent his Son for us to serve the Son.
Mhm.
Right? Satan sends the Antichrist
For us to serve them.
for
For them
to serve the Antichrist.
Right.
The false prophet is going to laud up the Antichrist.
They all three are working in unity.
They're all false.
And that's the thing. That's what I'm trying to say. We say they're gonna work in unity. They all work in unity. Of course, we know they're working, but as believers, how do we see this unity working, but yet being able to deceive so many people?
Well, first of all, he said the Antichrist is gonna be what? Have the power to get the unregenerated ones, charisma. He's gonna have charisma, the politics, he's gonna have all this wrapped up in one to get those in the line
To follow him.
to follow him. Okay, then at the same time, you have the false prophets that's gonna be helping by speaking to them in falseness. Because Ray, you got the Antichrist, he's gotta go with what the Antichrist is saying, he's gotta bring the rest of them to align them in that way,
Mhm.
okay? And Satan is just gonna be Satan.
Yeah, I'm not, we know the out, what I'm trying to articulate is that. We look at a lot of stuff, scriptures, but it's linear, like, if they're going to be together, we know that, but we also must understand that. None of us will probably be in that room, so these are teachings of things, hey, look, be aware that this person may move a system like this person may move, just in the teachings of them. Like you wouldn't teach this, well, I mean, people do this all the time. You teach the Trinity together, but you know it's an individual thing, individual's understanding of each one. But when we roll with the adversary, we kind of just say, hey, they just one, we just need to, it's.
No, it's the same thing on the other side.
Same thing on the, I'm just asking about the other side of the coin. I already kind of, but just to put the mindset that Satan, Antichrist,
I think he said it, he said it,
But you
the
got-
Trinity,
yeah.
the false Trinity.
right?
Just like you have God, they have Satan.
And ours
You have
is
the Son,
unified,
they
so
have
we
the
think
Antichrist.
that theirs will be unified. But it might not be, it might be scattered to attack us in multiple directions. You might be somebody who opens your mind up and you go to church and you can never be swayed by what you hear in the church, but you might leave out and your political views might take you down a whole different aspect. I'm just pointing out that the war could be on multiple fronts.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what- that's
it
what I'm
Always
saying.
will be.
In this kingdom that this false prophet setting up in the beast and Satan himself. Satan has got the umbrella over the whole thing,
Mhm.
okay? And under this umbrella, you have the beast who makes his political front, okay? And the political front, of course, will be political agendas. He deals with military warfare.
Right.
Okay, we saw that with the 10 nations coming together, okay? He deals with buying and selling, commerce and things of this nature. That's his primary goal, okay? He deals with the social agenda of the world. The false prophet deals with the religious side of the world. So they got the whole panoramic view of man's involvement in living in view. Spiritual, political, military, the whole 9 yards. So the false prophet's main goal is religious, but in his religious, he have a political point of view, point to the beast. Obey those who have rule over you.
Yeah.
That's what the scripture tells us. you know?
And
Okay,
kill for
so
it.
the beast will have rule over them, but he will have rule primarily over the political arena of the world, because he will have a great political interest and a war interest in the world.
Yeah.
Because at the end, the Antichrist, under the umbrella of Satan, is gonna have a military mind, because in the end, he's gonna war against the saints.
Yeah.
After the millennium, he's gonna war against the saints. And so that's what Christ is gonna deal with him. So he have to have a political and military strategy to even think that way. But the goal of the false prophet is to get people to worship this political minded man.
Antichrist.
Right.
Regardless of what his religious views are. That's what I was, the false,
Regardless of what, who's religious who.
the Antichrist. It's
Antichrist.
right. It's anything. They may come at you at a time that might become a Muslim.
Everything but Christ.
Anything but, and that's the point of what I'm saying about the attack coming from both sides of the table. While we have a better understanding later on in Revelations where you have to take the mark of the beast to receive food. Because why can't I go to the church and get food? If church is separate from state, I should still be able to get help in a system of church, but you can't. Because the same people that's preaching there, you're now excluded from there. You cannot walk into those places because you're not accepted. And we see, if you look now, we see that engine revving up. Maybe not in our time, but we see, you ever see a glimpse of something? Okay. You can't even really go to it like, yeah, that's a whole nother time, whole nother conversation for another time. But what I'm saying is, that's why I asked the question, because it's gonna be easier if people aren't teaching that separation is there. The same way our faith should be understood in the Trinity. The adversary should be understood as a Trinity.
Everything
So,
God has, they have a false. Everything that God has, they have a false of it. False Trinity.
Opposite, yeah. Look at 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4.
Yep, that's what we're really close.
Say again?
He said he's gonna read that in closing, so he said you're done.
It's in my notes.
He said you're done.
So you saying I'm done?
Yeah.
No.
He said you're done. He's reading that in closing.
Let me-
Verse 12 if you want.
What you say, start at 12?
No, you can read it all the way down to verse 12.
Yeah, well, I got specifically verse 4. Let me read that real quick. Who opposes and exalts himself above, okay. All right. starting with verse 1. Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, that you not be quickly shaken from your composure, or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter, as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come. He's telling you, don't be fooled. That's what that's saying right there. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction. Verse 4, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? And you know what restrains him now, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. Then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will slay with the breath of his mouth, and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming. That is, the one whose coming is in accord with the activity of Satan, with all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of wickedness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, so as to be saved. For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence, so that they will believe what is false. Say again? God. Give you over to it? Is that what that? In order that they may be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in the wickedness. But the false prophet, say again?
That's why we had to put on our full armor.
Yeah, the whole arm.
Yeah. Full, all of it.
W-H-O-L-E.
You must keep it intact.
Yeah. No problem.
In closing. But the false prophet is not a king who would and will not exalt himself, but exalts the first beast, the Antichrist. That's what the false prophet does. He caused the earth and those that dwell therein to worship the first beast. Revelations 13:2. And I got two last scriptures I'm going to read to you. Ephesians 4, verse says, do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Revelations chapter 13. I'm going to read 16 and 17. And it says, and he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, and the free men and slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. And he provides that no one will be able to buy or sell except the one who has the mark, either the name of the beast or the number of his name. Which, go ahead.
Can I share something very interesting about that particular thing? Why, when John was preaching that, it would have been understood, because the Maccabean revolt was something that was preached to all of the children of Israel. It was something that was taught. It's actually celebrated every year at the festival, one of the festivals that Jesus went to. And that is the same thing that one of the rulers, I think it was maybe Ptolemy, he put a statue out, and then the statue didn't work, and he continued to do that. And he told them the only way that they will be able to buy groceries was to have an ivy leaf symbol on their hand, which represented Dionysus. So these things have happened to them before, and this is why John is saying this revelation is so important, because throughout time we have seen this and we know it's coming. We have been tested as a nation. prepare yourselves for it again.
And one last scripture, 2 Peter, chapter 3, verse 7. And it says, but by his word, the present heavens and earth are being reserved for fire. So how many people we've heard talk about that or misunderstanding that? Kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. That's what this earth, the present earth and heaven is reserved for.
And the thing about it,
Got
God formed the earth. He built in the earth what he would use to destroy.
Yeah.
See, he built water for the days of Noah.
you know it.
And he built fire for the last.
Right.
He built it in because in the creation of the creating of the earth, all that was considered.
Yes.
So this is nothing that Peter's, coming to in time. He just realized it. When God formed the earth, he had built in it. So all that we read now is not just happening. It's being brought to pass. It's being moved forward.
Yeah.
Nothing is just rolling forward. God is bringing this to pass. What he ordained before the foundation of the world. Even the coming of the lawless one, even the beast, even the false prophet, all this was built in the God's ordaining work before the foundation of the world.
Yes. They said there'll be a new heaven and a new earth, right? That concludes chapter 7. We will begin chapter 8 next week.